This conference will
Board
now
meeting.
be recorded.
I'll start over. Call the Square County IDA meeting to order at 9:32. And the first order of business would be to review and approve the September 16th, 2020 minutes. Upon review, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Seconded.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The next item of business we have is to appoint a chairman, and I'll act as the nominating committee, and I'd like to suggest to nominate Jessica Burton to move from vice chair to chairman. If there's any discussion or a motion to make that move, I have talked to Chet and he is willing. He hasn't stepped back or anything.
So moved.
I will second that.
Peter second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
By doing that action, we have a vacancy at vice chair. And Wanda's the treasurer. So essentially, I'd like to have either Peter or Joe think about being vice chair. And I would take any conversation related to that.
I will defer to Joe as vice chair.
Joe, how do you feel, Joe? Is that all right with you, or?
Yeah, it's all right.
I think.
I nominate Joe.
We have a motion on the floor to accept Joe as vice chair.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So moved. Moving on to the next item is to review the Middleburg Meadows and Sharon Springs Inc. projects. I requested a status update from SSI, and at this time, SSI is still working with a bank in an effort to secure financing. They are waiting to formally approach us as the idea until they finalize and obtain an answer on this financing. So therefore, at this time, we do not have a formal request. I will say their representatives here have talked to me weekly, and as of yesterday, they put in formally, once again, a business plan, which they'd already done, but an updated financial projections to the bank. I don't know their time frame. It's getting shorter and shorter as the year end approaches us. They know where we're at, and that's the status as we speak. Anybody can make a comment or?
Well, when do we have to make a decision on this? When is our?
I think the sooner the better would be. I mean, I would like it by year end. I don't know if it has to be. We extended their benefits until, I mean, as in the sales tax letter, until 12/31. The jobs were also supposed to be completed by 12/31. This is 2020. And, neither one is going to happen. So the pilot will keep going unless we take an action. The sales tax letter will end, so they won't get any more exemption. So I suppose you could work into the early next year. It wouldn't be the worst case scenario. It's just that, it seems like the faster the better. But they just won't have an answer for probably weeks. That puts us, maybe they'll have it by the end of November. I don't know how fast the bank is going to move and what they have. I do know that, the real estate taxes are due obviously in January for the town and county, and they do jump with the pilot program that we have, relatively significantly. I don't have the absolute dollar amount, but I know for the year they jump from about $8,000 roughly to 48. So everybody significantly gets an increase. Now, that's what happens in January. So I think we got, I think I'll keep working on them. And hopefully they'll have some answer maybe by the next meeting, presumably maybe in the middle of late November for us. And at that point, if they still don't have an answer, we may have to, discuss it further. And
That's reasonable. That's reasonable, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, if they don't have financing, I don't know what there is to discuss at this point.
Ron, if we wait till the end of November to make whatever we're going to do, does that give us enough time to do what we have to do?
It should. I mean, it makes it tight, and obviously once you get into December, it probably will, won't give us, time to finish it by December 31st. You can make a decision. It just won't, be formalized until the paperwork is done and, votes are made and et cetera. So November's not horrible by any means. Just makes it, more tight. And, we have to have time to contact the village, the school, and the town for comment, which we like to do, and we always try to do.
Have they commented at all? I mean, it seems to me that they should be concerned about this also, even more so than we are.
Yes, I mean, they know what's happening at this stage, but I don't think they've taken it to the boards, to have a full discussion. So I don't have the full analysis from them. I mean, they're certainly aware of it. I've talked to them.
But isn't that the problem, that their bureaucracy, the county, the schools, the village, the town, they have to go through their meetings and board meetings, and if we wait till November and they haven't done anything, I don't see how any decision, at least as far as they're concerned, could be finalized by anyway.
Well, they'd have their monthly meeting in December, so they could discuss it. And in this case,
Okay.
it's an amendment, so it's not as time consuming as an initial project would be.
Okay.
But you're right, Joe, it gets down to the timing. I mean, November's, you only have December to discuss. Unless you go into the new year, so I'd rather not do that personally. I don't think anybody would. Go into the new year because it could throw a wrench into any plans, any schedule the town and county might have with their money. Although fortunately, it's not a huge, budget breaker for anybody. I mean, it's not like a gas company giving $1 million. It's in the low thousands instead.
But you've kept them apprised of the, I don't know if the right word is likelihood that this might not happen, where they might not get financing, correct, Ron?
I have. I mean, one reason they haven't come back to us yet with a formal letter or any request is the local folks want to secure financing before they come before us, simply because we've alluded, and me specifically, carried a message that, without financing, I think there will be a question mark on extending it. And they know that.
2 months' time is not a lot to put that financing package together and get an answer and, get it anywhere near to closing. I mean, that's a really, really short time because they haven't even got any sort of a commitment or anything yet. I don't think, have they?
No, well, no.
That's really stretching it.
I mean, they will not have a closing before December 31st. I'm quite sure of that. The question is, will they have a commitment letter?
Commitment
No.
letter with about 100 conditions.
That could very well be.
What are the implications if we go into the next year?
Well, I'm not sure I have all the implications, but I know if we go within a month or two of the next year, I don't think that would harm anything in essence. But, obviously the longer you know, if the pilot's supposed to end, or they're supposed to maintain and perform by December 31st and don't, I mean, you wouldn't want to drag into June, for instance. You know, the end of January, I don't think is an issue. It's just longer it goes, the more it just languishes.
Okay.
So that's where we are. So I will certainly keep everybody updated, and even before the next meeting as we go. If I get a letter, I'll, you know, send it for requests and inform everybody. Moving on to the Middleburg Meadows, we do have a request for an extension, and I think everybody has a copy of their request. I have currently referring the situation with legal, and still need to speak to the jurisdictions. I'm bringing it before the board comment now before I go to the jurisdiction. You know, I'll have to go to the, you know, it's a village project also, so it's a village, town, county, and school. I will run it by them. But as known, the housing portion of this project was not completed, or would not be completed by 12/31/20. The store was completed and is successfully being managed, and the jobs are there. The extension in time for the housing project would allow that piece to be completed. They're asking for 3 years. The company is asking for an extension of time with no modifications to the pilot payments. So as far as the financial part, it would remain the same as already in the pilot. So I would open up for questions or comments on that, and then we can go. My plan, for instance, would be to go, you know, I will speak with the jurisdiction, and then we will bring it back before maybe November meeting and see what everybody wishes to do. You know, what we can do is we can reject their request, we can approve their request, or approve their request with modifications. And modifications possibly could be, they're asking for 2 years, you could always put, well, we'll extend it. Well, we want to see where you're at in 2 years, or, you know, or 1 or whatever. So it's food for thought on that scenario.
Ron, the store is successful, you said?
Yeah, so far, as far as I know, Joe, it is. I mean, they report jobs in the building. They're meeting their minimum jobs, a few jobs over that actually. Minimum's 25, or the goal is 25, and they have about 28 or 9 FTEs. And, you know, it seems like it's operating. People, as far as I know, are very happy with it.
Well, that's encouraging. I mean, I think that's an encouraging indication that these people know how to do business, and that if the store is successful, and based on what the letter says, you know, the housing, what with situation with the pandemic, people are moving to the country, etc. I think that's an encouraging situation, especially that the store is successful.
I agree.
I would add that the 2 principals involved in Middleburg Meadows, Carver Laraway and Jim Becker, are pretty reliable and trustworthy. So I'm not sure if we want to extend it for 3 years, but I think certainly the request is reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. You know, they've followed up with us with this letter. There's nothing that we have to pursue them or anything like that.
I would add that there certainly seems to be a market for condos based on what's happening across the street from our building there over at Mark Nadew's place. He just keeps adding.
Yeah, if that's any indicator, that's a good sign.
Yeah.
Well, what I'll do is, I think we're on a positive note here, but I will follow up with the municipalities and then report back. We can put it on the agenda for a vote on the next meeting. That being said, moving on to the solar pilot policy. As previously discussed, we are trying to create a policy within our pilot program that specifically addresses solar projects. At this point, we have two scenarios. One is to have a pilot policy whereby we set an absolute per megawatt amount, which, as discussed, the amount would be roughly 25,000 the county board has stated in a resolution. The other possible avenue would be to have the SCIDA not set a number, but condition approval of the pilot on what the jurisdictions involved in any specific project would want to have. Once it is decided which policy to undertake, and this is more a procedure, we would have to send each jurisdiction our potential change in our policy, allow them to make comment, and then take those comments into consideration at the next meeting, or however long it takes. It might be December, depending on the time of review. So these comments will then be considered, and then we would have a vote. That's essentially the procedure. Go ahead, Joe.
Well, I was going to ask, there's a third option, is not to change it.
That is correct. Yes. With that option, we wouldn't have any special consideration for solar. It would be, they have to either do our standard pilot, or we would deviate from the pilot if they ask for a different number of years. And I say years because 10 years is our standard, and most folks or most companies indicate they want a minimum of 15. So every time solar company would ask if that scenario remains true, we would be deviating from the policy. However, it is an option, and it also during that option, we would go back to each municipality anyway. So in addition, we'd go back to the municipality for approval.
Using that, supposing we have that option that of not changing it. When you do a pilot, the pilot is based on the assessed valuation, right, of the property. And on these solar farms, if I'm not mistaken, a lot of the property is removable. So the assessed valuation aspect to the assessment, the pilot is really not appropriate, because the money is in personal property that's not removed. If we do not change the policy, do we have the right under the existing policy to base the pilot not on the assessed valuation, but on some other criteria?
Joe, I'd have to check in on that. It usually does go by assessed valuation, but usually is a key word. So I'd have to check with our attorney. But what you said so far is correct. You're absolutely correct on the equipment. It's assessed on the value of the project when it's built, but then the equipment starts depreciating right away. And I don't know the schedule of the depreciation, but then it's going to go down. So there is an issue with the assessments.
Isn't the equipment, though, not even real property? In other words, it's not a building. The solar equipment, a building is just like land. It's called real property under the law, whereas equipment is removable. They can take these panels out, replace them, do whatever they remove them, etc. So I think that's part of the issue with the assessed valuation consideration for pilots in a solar project.
Yes, and I'd have to check on that component, Joe. I don't know.
Another aspect of that, of course, is accelerated appreciation. which allows them to to depreciate even more rapidly, so that by the time you get to a taxable period, there's almost nothing left to tax.
That's true. Yeah.
Yes, even our standard pilot takes it 10 years out. If it was accelerated, it would be closer.
But the fact that you take a depreciation on, let's say, a building doesn't affect the actual assessed value, does it? I mean, the assessed value is based on what the value is to a willing buyer and seller. When you take depreciation, you're going into book value, what the property is on reflected on the books of the company. So I'm not sure how that would work.
I'm not either, Joe, because it would, and that's why I'll probably wind up with the company saying it's worth this and the municipality saying it's worth that.
Yeah.
Simply because of that, they're not going to lower the assessment on the municipality side because of the value and the income approach. And the company will say, yeah, well, I can't resell it for X because it's depreciated. And then you wind up with a discrepancy.
Yeah.
Which is one reason, obviously, to set an absolute dollar amount where they don't have, you don't have to worry about the assessment.
I wonder too, one of our objectives is to secure full-time employment, and the number of full-time employees with the solar projects, once construction is done, and the construction is usually done by people who come from the outside, I don't think there are any full-time employees. There are people that are brought in to check things every once in a while and to mow the lawn. So this seems to fall into a very different category than something like Middleburg Meadows or even SSI, where we're not going to be generating any real jobs in the future. So this is sort of a bonanza for the solar companies. There's simply no question. They can really game the tax system pretty sharply.
Yeah.
In fact, the large solar project in the town of Sharon has yet to apply for a pilot.
Right.
Right. They're probably going to say, well, this is vacant land with personal property that can be removed at will, so that we don't need a pilot because the assessed value should be very low.
No. And to follow up on your comment about pilot, they do plan on putting one in, Joe. They have yet to. So correct, they have not applied yet. I suspect it would be the beginning of the year, if it gets that far, or when it gets that far. Well, I guess where we're at is what do we want to do, or do we need to gather more information? I have talked to the county and the energy committee chair, and I was invited to another meeting tomorrow after our meeting, of course, but I mean, he's still supportive of the dollar amount per megawatt to be included. He does not have a problem with the negotiation aspect of saying, every municipality can have their own mind. He likes the dollar amount as a starting point, at least in there, so it's recognized. But as far as our pilot goes, if we actually adopt a change, it would have to be one or the other. It would either have to be, you go to the municipalities for each municipality per project, or you set the dollar amount. So if we want to make a change in the pilot, it would essentially be one of those two methods.
Ron, when you refer to the jurisdiction, is it only the town that, for instance, the town of Schoharie for the Borrego project, or does the county and the school district have a say?
They should have, all of them should have a say, Peter. Well, all three of them.
Okay,
The town tends to be the lead, but mostly in negotiations, I guess. But they're all three should be involved, and would be with us if we go forward.
well, I like the idea of putting a dollar number there, then 25,000 per meg doesn't seem unreasonable, considering the the tax situation with these large companies, and the subsidized nature of this this particular industry. So they're kind of protected, being given all sorts of breaks. So protecting the local taxpayer seems to be a pretty important consideration for us.
That would basically, though, kill solar in our county. If the other, if the state says it's 5,000, and I'm not, if I'm not mistaken, Ron, other counties, I don't remember what you said about the other counties, what dollar amounts the IDAs have put in for this sort of thing. But if the surrounding counties, let's say, stay with the state number, we don't get any solar projects here. I mean, I'm not, that necessarily is a bad thing, but it would be a fact.
The range is 4,500 to 5,500 normally. That's where the difference lies, of course. Yeah,
So we'd be five times what the surrounding counties would be. I don't know.
that is true.
By taking the option of negotiating, then the municipalities would have the option of saying, well, we want 25,000. And so be it. But maybe another one might say, well, we'll take 17 or 18. And if they do that, that's more than they'd get if there was nothing at all, if they walked. So having the option, that kind of an option would give more flexibility to the municipalities, and they could either take the 25,000 that the county has already specified, that, or they could take as little as the state. But that's their option. If they took 5,000, it's more than they have now on land that probably is not being used at all. Seems that there'd be more flexibility that way.
I like that approach.
I do too.
My guess is that if the municipalities know that the county is set 25,000 per megawatt, they're going to go for as much money as they can get, especially if they don't want it. So Sharon Springs, I understand that the supervisor really doesn't want it. Well, they may go for the 25,000, but that's their option. They can choose to accept or not.
Correct.
So I guess I would favor that over, setting a specific amount. But I'd see a lot of municipalities probably choosing, well, we want 25,000. Well, like Joe says, they're not going to come if they can go over to Montgomery County or Otsego County or Delaware and get it for 25 to 5,500 per megawatt.
Right. It just opens up the option for every township to make their own decision. I mean, even though all the town supervisors did vote on this, there does seem to be, some gray area.
So you're meeting with the committee again tomorrow?
Yes.
Well, maybe we ought to defer until we find out exactly what the positions are here. Is there any reason that we would need to move on this right away?
I don't think, well, I don't believe so. And the reason I say that is obviously the next area is just around the corner. I do think, their approvals are, I don't know the dates of their other approvals for siting and variances and zoning and that type of thing, but I think they're shortly. And when that happens, they will be here. And I would just like to, sort of in fairness, have it at least, here's our position. But Chad, at this point, I don't think waiting 3 or 4 weeks is going to really do any harm as far as that goes.
Well, I'd suggest maybe we wait until the next meeting till we have more that information.
But Ron, when you meet with them, could you advance Chet's compromise here? That maybe what we do is put 25 in, but leave the final decision up to the municipality. If they want to negotiate higher or lower, it's up to them, and we would follow their lead. Is that your compromise idea, Chet?
Well, yes, but I don't know as I'd put in the 25,000. I think the county's already specified 25,000. All the supervisors know what the county has recommended. So I don't know if we have to put in the 25,000.
I don't think we can. I mean, we have to either pick one, pick the 25, or pick the ability for the municipalities to make their own. So it's basically one or the other. I essentially can't have it both ways.
So is that what legal says, Ron?
Yes.
Okay.
And the county could change that $25,000 number next year if they choose to. So, or whenever they want to, they could change that number. So
That's correct. And we would have to, if we followed suit, we would change it as well, but just have to go through our administrative procedures to do so. And Peter, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
So Peter, everything except specifying 25,000 would be my recommendation or suggestion.
Well, let's see what reaction there is to Ron proposing that to the supervisors.
Yes, I agree.
As a matter
As far as the length of term of the pilot, I mean, for the most part, we've always been just 10 years, right, Ron?
correct.
I mean, I think we just stick with the 10 years, or our proposal would be to stick with 10 then, as opposed to stretching it out to 15.
Well, I know the solar companies are going to want 15 minimum. Not that we have to follow that, but with their financing plans. And so probably would go that route. We would set a year date so it wouldn't vary, or it wouldn't be, 15 or 5 I'll have to check on that, Jeff. I'd like to check on that, see how much variance we could do on that.
Mm-hmm.
We're trying to get away from deviating, so I want to make sure it's tidied up as much as possible.
Because they could always reapply it. I mean, if they're still around for another 10 after the initial 10 is done, which is what, like Tennessee Gas has done.
Walmart.
Correct.
For Walmart, correct?
Is it possible to say that, our limit is 10, but can be negotiated? Up, minimum is 10? Rather than coming and say, 15 right off the bat? Maybe just say the minimum, and then we don't have to say anything about negotiation. For solar. This is just for solar, right?
Correct. It would be a subset inside the policy, inside the overall policy.
I think you need to find out, Ron, too, if that would satisfy their financing source, if that language was used, or if they had to have specific years.
I agree.
It's like with Tennessee Gas, even though it's 10, I mean, there's language in there that protects or used to protect them if in fact they did some improvements to the grounds, like with additional pump stations and such. And then that wouldn't come into play until after the existing pilot was over.
Right, in the case, yes, Jeff. Yeah,
Because if you stretch out to 15, and if they started with like, I don't know, 5 or 10 panels, and then all of a sudden during the term of the pilot, which might be 15, if they added on another 10 or 20 of them, I mean, then we'd be locked in at that first rate.
well, we can have language in there to prevent that. Any,
Okay.
I think any expansion would also require the approval of the local planning board. And if the experience in the town of Schoharie is any guide, that's going to be tough to get. It's tough enough that they've already reduced it in the town of Schoharie from 7.5 to 5. So if they tried to increase it back to 7.5, there would be a great deal of popular dissatisfaction with that kind of thing. So. The other thing is that most of the companies, in the case of Borrego's not an operating company. They simply build it and then they sell it to somebody else. So whether the new permanent owner will have any interest at all in adding on to it, I'm not sure. I don't know if there's enough history around the country with this kind of thing to know whether that would be the case. Ron, also, who is responsible for setting the assessed valuation? Would that be the local assessor or the IDA?
Local assessor.
Okay.
And in this case, you'd probably have to go out and hire a firm to do the valuation. Simply because I've been told that the assessors, they have nothing to go by, essentially. It's a new business, a new model.
Yeah.
Nobody really has a lot of experience. So you take so you try to hire a firm, which costs everybody, money, of course, but you get some valuation from that. So there's upfront issues with evaluation. But they can be solved, but you have to hire somebody, basically.
Okay.
I have a question for Jeff. Hey, Jeff, is the solar equipment all personal property as opposed to real property?
I would agree that it's personal property, yeah. Because it's certainly, your comment that it could be taken off. I mean, real property is something that is sort of anchored to the ground. And so, no, I agree with your thought there that it would be personal property, yeah.
Okay.
What effect does that have on assessments, Jeff?
I think it just brings a different level of expertise to come in and to evaluate that value. I mean, normally the starting point would be what the actual cost was. I would believe, but again, going back to what Joe had said, I mean, taking the depreciation, I mean, you got tax value and you got book value and what the real value is to what it's worth. In fact, if in fact it was sold, but like you said, last month's meeting, that value, if it was to be sold, could certainly be knocked down considerably if in fact new technology came out. So which would make the latest edition more valuable, and the existing one that was there already worth who knows considerably less. Yeah.
Yeah.
My sense is that the personal property aspect would not be involved in the assessment. It would be like having vacant land and putting a mobile home on it.
Yeah.
You know, one of these mobile homes. You can take away the mobile home and anytime you wanted. And so when that property is assessed, to me, I think we'd have to check this out, but when that property is assessed, it's assessed as vacant land, pretty much.
Certainly would hope so. Yeah. That's how it would start that process of evaluating it for a dollar amount.
I'm wondering if that's what those people from that large project in Sharon are looking at and saying, you know, why should we have a pilot based on, you know, a whole bunch of equipment that we could remove, when basically what the assessed valuation should be based on is vacant land or land with very minor real property add-ons to it. So. Which would require us for a solar, which would require the municipalities and us to have a dollar amount, because it's different from a manufacturing operation or a retail or housing or anything like that.
Or like Tennessee Gas, where at least you've got, at a minimum, you've got pipe in the ground, which certainly isn't going to be taken out. Yeah.
That's right.
I agree with your logic, Joe.
Well, at this point, I guess going back to Chet, I guess I'll follow up on a couple of these issues, attend that meeting, and then schedule again for our meeting the next time. Does that sound?
Very good. Yeah.
In the meantime, I was able to, or they asked, anybody else can come to this meeting tomorrow. And Peter, I put you on the spot, so maybe if you want to attend with me, if you have time. It's at 5 o'clock. It's at 5 o'clock. It's 5 o'clock.
5 o'clock. Okay.
Tomorrow in the county basement. They just moved it. They moved us to the basement.
Okay.
They said it wasn't going to be too long as far as your schedule goes, scheduling.
All right.
But
well, I think I can make that.
it'll be interesting. There'll be, as far as I know, it'll be Don as a leader, as the chairman of the Energy Committee, and probably 5 or 6 other supervisors. So certainly we'll get a feel, for the board.
Okay.
All right, the next item is the COVID-19 grant program resolution, which is all included in your package.
That's a very nice, tight resolution. I was very impressed by it.
I paid for it, Peter. Or I haven't yet paid for it, but I will. Well, I wanted it done right with the state regulations. I mean, Sarah and I probably would have made it up, but this way it follows, and it's done accordingly. In a nutshell, the resolution authorizes participation in the program. It references the legislation authorizing the program by the state and formally called the State Disaster Emergency Loan Program. It describes the terms, which, as you see in the attachment, which is in the back page, the amount the agency to commit is not to exceed 10,000. We provide grants in the amount not to exceed 2,500. The program will be administered by the agency, which is a slight change from last time. Because the program's small and the fact it's a grant and not a loan program, I decided in connection with Sarah that we could run it and keep it in-house. Going further, the agency reviews and approves qualified applicants based on grant program guidelines. And the grant program will provide for monitoring and reporting as required under New York State statute. The resolution and open up for comments before approval or not.
Is this open just to nonprofits, Ron, or also for for-profit people?
Both, nonprofit and for-profit. You know, what we would do, what we plan on doing is advertising, and of course, part of the advertising would be contact seat, you know, for lists, and so I'm sure the word would get out there relatively quickly, and then they have to do the application. It does have to be reviewed formally by the board in a board meeting. You can lump them all together. You can do any applicants individually, but it does have to come before the board. So Sarah basically would be the lead person, but she would make sure everything's there, and then we take it to the board for acceptance or rejection.
Do you expect that we'd have a lot of applicants?
Well, I would think there'd be a fair number. I think the longer COVID obviously goes, the more cleaning supplies are needed and protection is needed, and it doesn't look like winter is going to end this at this point. It's going to get worse, at least for the temporary. And we all know, I mean, the fairgrounds will, one of the initiators of this, so I'm sure they'll come in. One or two other people have contacted us, and I don't know for sure, but I would think there would be some demand.
You're going to put a deadline when they can apply for this, Ron? And then look at all the applications at one time, or how are we going to do that? Because there's only going to be, probably 4.
It would be first come, first serve.
Okay.
Essentially. And there is a deadline. Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's December 31st, 2021.
That's correct.
And the expenses can go back if they haven't been reimbursed by another program to July 1st. Legislative wise, we could have went back a few more months than that, but it crosses our fiscal year, and it's just cleaner if we stick with July 1st.
Okay.
Well, if there's no further comment, the resolution needs a roll call vote. So I will read the name off, and they can say yay or nay. Chester Burton,
Yes.
Wanda King,
Wanda, you need to, yep.
Yes, Ron. Sorry.
that's okay. Joseph Trapani,
Yes.
Peter Johnson,
Yes.
and Ben is absent. At this point, the resolution passes unanimously. And we will let everybody know when we start on. We'll probably put that out relatively soon, and maybe by next board meeting, we'll have an application. The next item is other business. Does anybody have any other business to bring up?
Well, and I think we also have to have a motion on that, don't we? In the front page, first page.
You're correct, Sarah. Thank you. There should have been a motion for the resolution to be offered.
So moved.
Second,
Second by Peter. Thank you. Thanks, Sarah. I get to correct that. The other one, it's not on the agenda, but as far as the next meeting date, anybody have any ideas? It is now October 28th. Due to the solar and Middleburg Meadows and SSI, if everybody's schedule would permit, and I don't know that, but maybe the week before Thanksgiving. Or the week, or I guess the week after, it could be all right. If 3 weeks is too soon, maybe wait 5 weeks.
So you're thinking a week of the 30th?
Yes.
Shall we shoot for December 2nd or 3rd? No, 1st or 2nd, I was thinking. 2nd.
What day of the week is that? Oh, I got to count.
Wednesday.
Just a second. That's fine.
Wednesday.
It's Tuesday or Wednesday, which one you prefer?
Doesn't matter.
Either one.
Well, let's aim at Tuesday then, the 1st.
usual time, 9:30.
Yes, Peter. I'll contact Ben, obviously, and everything will go. Other than that, I make a motion, have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded.
Sarah will get that.